Hello, my name is Matthew McAvoy and I'm a Research Associate at the Omega Research Foundation. The Omega Research Foundation is an independent human rights organisation based in the UK. At Omega we investigate and expose the global manufacture and trade in weapons, particularly police and security equipment. We identify the weapons used to commit human rights violations and advocate for strict use of force rules and oversight. We work closely with ODIHR, including by joining some ODIHR assembly monitoring missions. In the previous videos of this module, our trainers stressed that police should always aim to facilitate assemblies and that force can only be used in very limited circumstances and in compliance with the principles of legality, necessity, proportionality, precaution, non-discrimination and accountability. When force is used unlawfully against participants in an assembly, the human rights, social and health impacts can potentially be severe. As such, it is essential for us monitors to be familiar with the use of force principles outlined in the previous video, as well as with the types of weapons and other tactical options that are available to law enforcement in the course of policing assemblies. In this video, we will mention some of the weapons and tactics most frequently used in the policing of assemblies, and we will briefly present a couple of additional resources to aid your monitoring work. I will first briefly present to you some of the types of equipment and tactics that are most commonly used by law enforcement to police assemblies. These are acoustic devices, which are loudspeaker devices usually mounted on vehicles. They can produce high volume sounds at levels and frequencies that can be highly irritating or cause pain. Barriers, and these include permanent, dynamic and rapidly deployable barriers. An example of a dynamic barrier would be a line of officers, often armed with shields. Chemical irritants, including tear gas and pepper spray, which are delivered through handheld aerosol sprays, shoulder-worn backpack sprayers, hand-thrown grenades, weapon-launched projectiles and grenades, as well as via water cannon. Projectile electric shock weapons, often referred to using the brand name Taser. These fire barbed darts attached to wires and deliver an electric shock to the target, usually causing the person to collapse. Direct contact electric shock weapons, and these include stun guns, stun batons, stun shields and others, and human rights bodies have expressed strong reservations about the use of these weapons. Containment or kettling, and that is the tactic of enclosing a group of people in a specific area, preventing them from leaving and preventing others from joining the group. Kinetic impact projectiles, commonly referred to as rubber bullets or plastic bullets. Launchers, commonly called riot guns, which are used to fire or, in the case of some drones, release projectiles. Mechanical restraints such as handcuffs. Police dogs. In public gatherings, uses of police dogs have included supporting cordons, escorting marches, crowd dispersal, and assisting in the arrest or detention of a subject. Police horses, protective equipment such as shields and helmets, handheld kinetic impact devices such as batons, stun grenades, which are also known as flashbangs, and these are explosive devices that emit extremely loud noise and or bright flashes of light when they detonate. Surveillance and interception technologies, and finally water cannon, which are usually mounted on armoured public order vehicles and can be used to keep crowds at a distance, to assist in their dispersal, or to support police cordons. And for more details on these equipment and tactics, I invite you to consult the Guide on Law Enforcement Equipment most commonly used in the policing of assemblies, which was developed jointly by Omega and ODIHR as a complementary tool to the revised ODIHR Handbook on Monitoring Freedom of Peaceful Assembly. And in this guide you can find photos and descriptions to aid identification of these equipment and tactics, the potential human rights and health implications associated with the use of the type of equipment in question, and some examples of inappropriate use from across the OSCE region. As the title suggests, the guide is not exhaustive. It only covers 16 types of equipment and tactics, but these are those that are most commonly used. Each tactical option has its own characteristics and intended uses, which we need to be aware of before monitoring an assembly. The degree and nature of risk associated with their use is determined by these characteristics, the manner in which the tactic is employed, and the vulnerabilities of those affected. Certain types of devices pose a particularly high risk of causing serious injury or even death. These include explosive devices such as stun grenades and certain kinetic impact projectiles. Chemical irritants such as tear gas pose a greater level of risk in circumstances, particularly when they're used in enclosed spaces against those with respiratory conditions. Certain tactics are likely to be indiscriminate, meaning that they can affect multiple people rather than just the targeted individuals, creating a high likelihood of impacting people who are not engaged in violent behaviour. These include water cannon, chemical irritant devices, stun grenades and kettling, among others. I will now hand over to my colleague Neil Corney, who is also a research associate at the Omega Research Foundation.
In addition to the use of force principles outlined earlier in this module, it is important for us monitors to have some knowledge of the international standards concerning the use of specific types of law enforcement equipment. This will help us understand how to document the use of force during an assembly. While going through all international standards on the topic is outside the scope of this course, we will use the UN Human Rights Guidance on Less Lethal Weapons in Law Enforcement to illustrate some of them. This document was elaborated to complement other instruments, such as the UN Basic Principles of Use of Force and Firearms by Law Enforcement Officials. It sets standards concerning the use of less lethal weapons, including in the context of assemblies, and parameters to assess the lawfulness of the use of the most commonly employed types of less lethal weapon. Police batons are one type of equipment covered by the UN guidance. Batons are used by law enforcement officials the world over, but it is important to know how to properly monitor their use when observing an assembly. On the screen, you can see some excerpts from the UN guidance section on police batons. 1. Overarm baton strikes on bones and joints have a heightened risk of resulting in dislocations, fractures, and soft tissue injuries. 2. Jabs or driving strikes with a baton at the thorax, neck or head should be avoided because of the risk of injury to and even rupture of vital organs. Officials should avoid baton strikes to sensitive areas of the body such as the head, neck and throat, spine, kidneys and abdomen. We have included this specific language here to demonstrate the importance of documenting any use of force in detail. When recording instances of use of force during an assembly monitoring exercise, it is not enough to say that batons were employed. Providing additional details will provide a clearer picture of what actually happened, such as the circumstances leading up to the use of batons, whether a warning was given, where the person or persons were struck and how many times, and the characteristics of the baton itself. Of course, it will not always be possible for us to document all of these details, particularly since the circumstances around use of force incidents can be rapidly evolving and potentially dangerous. However, it is important for us to be aware of the types of information that we should record where possible. On that note, please be aware that the Omega ODIHR guide contains questions that may help to guide documentation efforts when specific types of equipment are used. Key questions we should bear in mind include: in what circumstances was a given tactic or device used? Did officials use force only against those engaged in violent conduct, or was the force used indiscriminately? Were warnings given before the use of force? How far in advance of the use were warnings issued? Were people able to leave the area safely? Was medical assistance offered to those affected? I will now briefly mention some key considerations to bear in mind when documenting police equipment during an assembly monitoring exercise. Certain types of security and policing equipment can be dangerous. As monitors, we should always assume that weapons are loaded and ammunition and ordnance live and could cause injury. Not pick up any of these items and instead observe safely from a distance. If possible, we can take photographs, write detailed descriptions, or make drawings of the equipment found instead of picking it up. Using audio-visual tools for documentation is of great value to our assembly monitoring work. So, what do we need to be aware of when photographing or otherwise documenting police equipment? Depending on the type of equipment, important elements include their shape, markings, colours and writing, and their scale. At the Omega Research Foundation, we regularly receive requests to identify weapons used by law enforcement officials in different contexts. Unfortunately, poor quality images often make this impossible, whether it is down to incorrect use of zoom, flash, or other reasons. To illustrate this point, here are two photographs taken by monitors during an assembly monitoring exercise to document police use of force. On the right, you can see a photograph of an assembly monitor noting down the markings from a plastic label they found after police had used force. Good quality imagery or transcription of markings such as this can enable the identification of the specific product used. On the left, you can see a picture of the 4 projectiles lying on the roadside. This image allows us to see the shape and scale of the projectiles used by the police. Capturing these 2 images during our monitoring exercise made it possible for us to identify what equipment the police used in this instance. It was a hand-thrown, stun or sound and flash grenade that also randomly dispersed 18 rubber projectiles at a velocity of 450 kilometers an hour. Finally, it is crucial for us to record who is using the equipment during the assembly. It may be the military, security or police forces, or private security staff. Any details gathered will help build a picture to assess the appropriateness of the policing of the assembly. In this video, we have briefly presented some of the weapons and tactics most frequently used in the policing of assemblies. As monitors, it is important that we are able to identify these. Frequently, it is the manner in which a tactic is used that determines the nature and degree of risk to those affected. By familiarising ourselves with international standards on the use of specific types of equipment, we will be better placed to accurately document how force is used. The effective use of audio-visual tools is essential and central to our work as monitors. When recording the use of weapons and equipment, remember to try to capture their shape, colour, scale, and any markings, as well as who is using the equipment during the assembly. In the next module, we will provide you with an overview of key concepts and best practices regarding assembly monitoring security and safety.